Hello and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I am not sitting in front of my movie corner. I have my How Sharp Is Your Sword shirt on. I do not have a movie right next to me. And judging by the frame around me, we are back, taking down another atheist. This is Vice Rhino, and his video, The Bible Proves Jesus' Miracles, because it's in the Bible. Just like his, sayings of he's better sourced than the Bible, he is truly not better sourced than the Bible, because he makes a ton of claims in this 35-minute video that he cannot substantiate nor back up. Okay? And as I said, I've been through the whole entire things. Okay? And as we're going to continue on in this series, okay, we're going to see that, we have a bunch of these things. And piggybacking on what I said at the end of the last video, one of the reasons why we know that these guys were the authors, okay, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, okay, was because part of it was Polycarp and Papias, okay, were alive when the Gospels and Acts were written. So we have it on good authority that they knew the authors. Like, Polycarp literally was with John when he wrote his Gospel. Okay? They knew about the heretics and the heresies that were going on at the time. Okay? And Irenaeus, who was a disciple of Polycarp, was likely told who wrote what and when, because he was the student of Polycarp, who himself was a student of John. Okay? So John was likely talking about a lot of this kind of stuff. So the case is closed, buddy boy. Okay, as Dr. Jim said at the end of his articles, he always says this, okay? Well, actually, he says it kind of here in the beginning. He says, they are not modern historians, but their opinions are still interesting. Okay, here, lived in the 2nd to 3rd centuries. They are unanimous that John wrote the 4th Gospel as was authoritative for them, so it should be for us also. They lived before the Council of Nicaea in AD 325, so they are called the Ante-Nicene Fathers. Ante means before, A-N-T-E, right? When you ante into the pot, when it says ante up, right? You're throwing a chip in before the cards are dealt, okay? They're not modern historians, but their opinions are still interesting. Okay, and at the end of the articles, okay, Russ has a little closing paragraph, and he says, summing up the evidence, one scholar writes that in the early church, no other name than John has been suggested as the Gospel's author. Leon Morris, The Gospel According to John, Enderman's, 1971, page 25. And Carson and Moo write, most historians of antiquity, other than the New Testament scholars, could not so easily set aside evidence as plentiful and as uniform, page 233. Okay? And he says that about all of the gospel authors. He says no other authors have been proposed. Now, there was one person, okay, that Dr. Jim doesn't cite. There was one person who basically wrote, and I don't have the sheet with me, but he basically wrote that the gospel, that Irenaeus, there were like 3 different Johns at the time. There was John the Elder, there was John the disciple of the Lord, and then there was like another John. And he goes, it's likely that Irenaeus was referring to John the apostle of the Lord, but there's also John the Elder that he could be referring to. But most church traditions believe that John, the gospel author, and the writer of the 3 letters was the same, and the writer of Revelation was the same person who likely was there with Jesus, because of how accurate a lot of those things are. Okay? So, as Dr. Jim said, are these guys absolute historians, modern historians? No. But they are primary sources of information wherein history is written. Okay? Which is where we get history from, which we'll get into in a few. Okay, so let's jump back into this and let's continue on.
Whereas the apostles and prophets of the New Testament worked miracles to confirm their
I'll
message
cut that out.
that Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus performed miracles to bear witness that he was, in fact, the Son of God.
Actually, yeah, that is an interesting distinction. When Jesus does miracles, it is because he is literally God. But the followers of Jesus are supposed to be able to do equivalent miracles. So an alternate interpretation here is that Jesus tapped into some supernatural force that is not the Christian God and taught his disciples how to do the same. You could even account for the fact that miracles don't seem to happen anymore by saying that the disciples didn't, for one reason or another, teach this ability to any of their disciples. This is my Christian origin story headcanon now.
Cool story, bro. Now prove it. Okay? Because these verses actually debunk you. Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother. That's John, the gospel author, by the way. Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, the writer of the gospel I'm reading out of, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the zealot, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out after instructing them, "Do not go in the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter any city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the leper, cast out demons. Freely you received, freely give. Do not acquire gold or silver or copper for your money belts, or a bag for your journey, or even 2 coats or sandals or a staff, for the worker is worthy of his support. And whatever city or village you enter, inquire who is worthy in it, and stay at his house until you leave that city. As you enter the house, give it your greeting. If the house is worthy, give it your blessing of peace. If it is not worthy, take back your blessing of peace. Whoever does not receive you or heed your words, as you go out of the house and of that city, shake the dust off your feet. Truly I say to you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. But beware of men, for they will hand you over to the courts and scourge you in their synagogues, and you will even be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they hand you over, do not worry about what you are to say, about how or what you are to say, for it will be given to you in that hour what you are to say. For it is not you who speak, it is the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. Brother will betray brother to death, and as a father his child, his children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. You will be hated by all for my name, because of my name, but it is the one who has endured to the end who will be saved. But whenever they persecute you in one city, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a slave above his master. It is enough for the disciple that he become like his teacher, and the slave like his master. If they have called the head of the house Beelzebul, how much more they will malign the members of his household. Therefore do not fear them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be known or revealed, that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the darkness, speak in the light, and what you hear whispered in your ear, proclaim on the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a cent, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? The very hairs of your head are all numbered, so do not fear, you are more valuable than many sparrows. Therefore, everyone who confesses me before men, I will also confess him before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be the members of his household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life will lose it, and he who has lost his life for my sake will find it. He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward, and he who receives a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever in the name of a disciple gives to one of these little ones even a cup of cold water to drink, truly I say to you, he shall not lose his reward. It's pretty clear to whom Jesus is referring to. Okay? God the Father, Yahweh in Hebrew, not some other deity. So you have to prove your Christian origin story headcanon. Good luck.
Unbelievers should consider 7 reasons why the miracles of Christ are credible testimonies of his divine nature and teachings.
Wow, 7 whole reasons? That's impressive. Usually it's like 2 things. The Bible says so, and personal experience. I look forward to...
Well, the Bible does say so, and we have evidence that these stories are true. You haven't even given one source to back up your claim yet. Okay? So good job on that whole better sourced thing there, Vice Rhino. You're killing it. And by it, I mean your credibility.
Hearing about all these reasons.
Number 1, countless thousands witnessed his miracles.
Oh no, it's going to be 7 reasons starting with the assumption that everything in the Bible is perfectly accurate, isn't it?
Okay. Again, that's your opinion. Do you have any source whatsoever to back that claim up? Let's see.
Why do we always have to start with that assumption? That is a garbage assumption that doesn't get applied to any other text from history, so why should we treat the Bible differently?
Nope. Oh, and yes, it does. So, I don't know. Did you see Jake Tapper's latest book on Joe Biden and the mental health decline? Okay. It got ripped apart by both, like, Democrats and Republicans because the claims he made were already common knowledge to anyone with 2 functioning brain cells. Okay? So, now, one of the things that this guy is going to talk about, and this is one of the things that a lot of these atheists run to, are things like the blood and the grail. Okay? Supposedly based on Le Document Secret, okay, found in an archive in Paris. It was ripped to shred because the supposedly middle-aged documents that were found were written on actual paper, not made until centuries later, okay, after the invention of the printing press. So, it was supposed to be written on parchment, which was made out of animal hides at the time, okay, and placed into the archives by the hoaxer a decade previous. If you look at Darrell Bock's Breaking the Da Vinci Code for more information on that. Also, the Book of Mormon, right? Supposedly translated from golden plates, when in actuality, the amount of words that are in the Book of Mormon, and supposedly how big the plates were, okay, don't line up. Because even if you were to try to write the hieroglyphics, the reformed Egyptian hieroglyphics that he supposedly translated these things from, which was literally him sticking a crystal ball in a hat and going like this, which is divination, by the way, which is outlawed in the very Bible he tries to reference, weren't able to be written on that many supposed golden plates. It doesn't make any logical sense. Okay? So yeah, I could keep going, but I think you get the idea. He hasn't researched to see if any other books have been looked into. I mean, sure, the Bible is number 1 because it is true, because if it is true, which of course it is, then that means you're a sinner and you're in need of a Savior. And God has written the law in your heart. And that is why you want to stay, because of your love of sin. See Romans 1. Okay? The other part of it is that he is just saying, well, the Bible says it's true. Oh, great. Yes. Because it is historically accurate. It is a history book. Okay? It is a history. The first 39 books are the history of the Jewish nation. Okay? And the last 27 books, okay, are the history of the church and the life of Jesus Christ. Okay? So, if you're going to make the claim that the books are false, then you got to have some kind of a source to back that up. Trust me, bro, doesn't work. That's not an argument, son. Claim, data, warrant.
Aside from the fact that Jesus' miracles are recorded in the most historically documented ancient book in all the world,
That's a funny statement right there. I get the feeling that you know you can't claim it to be the most historically accurate book, so you call it the most historically documented. What does that even mean?
Historically accurate? Sure it is. I mean, the more archaeologists dig up, the more they prove the stories. Like, literally. They literally just dug up Shechem and found the original tabernacle to the Lord. Okay, before Solomon's temple. Like, literally where Samuel, the prophet, okay, his mom went and prayed, and Eli was there and was like, you know, hey, your wish is granted. The Lord says your wish is granted. Yeah, they literally dug that place up, man. They knew exactly where the Ark of the Covenant sat. And they found bones. Hundreds and hundreds of bones in crossbeds that show that that place was used for hundreds of years. They've even found under the Temple Mount, okay, where the Dome of the Rock sits, underneath the Dome of the Rock, they've literally found thousands and thousands of bone fragments and various other things that show that the place was a place of sacrifice. So what the f*** are you talking about? Like, literally, what are you talking about? So again, willing ignorance of this is not my problem. But it is also the most historically documented. As in, there is plenty of extra biblical sources that attest to the historicity of the Bible and the stories contained within. Again, this is your opinion. Do you have an actual source to back this claim up? Let's see.
Are you referring to manuscript count? Because that's really the only way that it could be true, and I'm not even sure that it would be that. But assuming that it would be, having a book copied out a bunch of times does not make the contents of that book true.
Again, fail. No sources. Oh, so does that mean that the dictionary or encyclopedia is false then? Because those have very high manuscript counts. I mean, like, we have literally thousands of encyclopedias that have been written on history. Literally thousands. Okay? Does that mean that they're not true because they have high manuscript counts? Or dictionaries? I mean, how many thousands of dictionaries have we had down through the years? Literally. Those are high manuscript counts. Duh. That doesn't mean anything. And no, we don't look to manuscript count. What we look at, if you ever bothered to look up textual criticism, which you never have because you're a fucking moron, okay? We look at the actual manuscripts to see if they align. I.e., does this manuscript of Matthew align with this manuscript of Matthew? This one's a little older, this one's a little newer. Do they line up? Okay, we look at Luke to Luke. You know, it means that the copier was in the presence of the original manuscript when he copied it. Because they didn't have Xerox machines back then. Okay? The printing press and Xerox machines weren't around then. Duh. Oh, and do you know what the first book that was ever printed on the printing press was? The Gutenberg printing press? Do you happen to know what the book was? Huh? Do you want to know what that book was? Right here. Learn it. It was the Bible. Common sense, man. Get some, Mr. Better Sourced.
which time and again has proven itself to be a reliable witness to history.
Sometimes it has, yes. Other times, it does stuff like say that Abraham was riding around on camels several hundred years before domesticated camels made their appearance in Israel, or says that there was a massive...
Lord, save me from the idiots. Okay. So, I went back and read the entire story of Abraham. I've read it several times, okay? But the only mention of camels, okay, is in 1216, okay? It says, "Therefore he treated Abram well for her sake, Sarah's sake, and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels." Okay? And this was because Abram went and lived for a while and then came back. And then he went up from Egypt. And all it says in 13:2 is, now Abram was very rich in livestock and in silver and in gold. Okay? 5. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. Okay? So, where were you getting this? Like, you say he was riding around on camels. Where does it say that? Chapter and verse. Where does it say that in the Bible? It doesn't, okay? And how do you know when domesticated camels were in Israel? Do you have a source on that? Hint? No.
Empire-wide census that forced people to go to the city of their ancient ancestors when no such census has ever happened anywhere.
Okay. I've debunked this before. Because when I was doing my thing last year, okay, I heard this crappy argument of there were never any empire-wide censuses. Roman census records are a collection of historical data from censuses taken by the Roman Empire for tax administrative purposes, though few complete census records survive. The primary records are found on papyri, mainly from dry regions like Egypt, and inscriptions from Asia Minor. These records prove insights into property distribution, population density, and the proportion of slave to free labor, which are crucial for managing an expanding empire. Censuses were primarily conducted to determine the number of citizens and their property for tax purposes and to administer the empire's resources. By registering and counting the population, Rome demonstrated its authority and control over its vast territories. While the Roman census under Augustus is well known, there were various censuses, including regular registrations for Roman citizens in Rome and provincial censuses for non-citizens. The census mentioned in the Gospel of Luke, which occurred in Judea when Quirinius was governor of Syria, was a provincial census aimed at assessing property and taxation after Rome took direct control of the province in 6 AD. Augustus' censuses. Augustus ruled 27 BC to AD 14, ordered several empire-wide censuses, which were large administrative undertakings to gather information about the population. Oh, I'm sorry. What, were you lying? Mr. Better Sourced? I hate these people. I really do. And I don't say that lightly. Because these guys are so ignorant. They have no clue what was actually going on. None whatsoever.
Like, could you imagine the logistical nightmare that would be? I don't even know what city I would go to for that. And how would that be enforced anyway? The purpose of a census is to count people and get certain information about them. meaning they don't already have that information, so how would they know if you're supposed to go to Bethlehem or stay in Nazareth? And that's not even starting.
It was for tax purposes. Distribution of resources. Oh my God, this guy is so dumb. And this guy calls himself better sourced than the Bible? Ugh. Okay, so how does the U.S. government enforce its census, Mr. Better Sourced? How do they do that then? Do you know? Do you even bother to know? Also, does genealogy mean anything to you? I mean, we literally have, like, just in Genesis, okay, we have, in 5, we have a genealogy, okay, in 10 and 11, we have genealogies, okay. If we go to, and that's what, 6 right there. It's like 5 or 6 right there. Okay. Then we have more genealogies in Genesis 36, and then we have because we also have, you know, the records of who the sons of Jacob were, okay, and the sons of Esau. Then when we get into the book of Numbers, okay, this is just the first 5 books, by the way, okay. Then when we get into the book of Numbers, literally the first like 10 chapters of the book of Numbers is literally a census and genealogy, okay? Is literally a census and genealogy of the Israelites after they left Egypt, okay? We also have in the book of 1 Chronicles is literally the genealogy of Abram from Adam all the way down to David and Saul, and then some post-exile. This is how they were able to trace where they were from. Because Bethlehem was known as the city of David, the birthplace of David, okay? That's why it was called the city of David. Jerusalem was also known as the city of David, okay? And then when we flip over to the New Testament, okay, we literally have the genealogy in Matthew and the genealogy in Luke, which I think is Luke 3. No, it's Luke 3. Okay, Luke 3:23, starting in verse 23 and then going through 38. Okay, and one was the genealogy of Mary, which I think was Luke, because I think he goes through, was the son of Mela, the son of Menna, the son of Mattatha, the son of Nathan, the son of David. Okay, so that's a genealogy of Jesus. Was the son of Mary, because the other one comes down through Abraham, and it goes down through Jacob, who was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Okay, and that's so Joseph was able to trace his through Solomon by Bathsheba, who had been the wife of Uriah. Solomon was the father of Rehoboam, and then all the way down from there. Okay. this one is through the son of Nathan, the son of David, which is Mary's genealogy. You see, they were like fourth or fifth cousins. They were like third or fourth cousins. Okay? Mary and Joseph were. But they were both of the house and the line of David. Okay? Just removed by a ton of generations. Okay? So, Luke tells us exactly why Joseph goes to Bethlehem, because he was the house and line of David. Which is why both Matthew and Luke give us the genealogy of Jesus' parents. Luke through Mary, Joseph through Matthew. Okay? So, are you watching this video? Are you sure this guy knows anything? Okay? Ignorance can be cured. Not so much with stupidity. Better sourced? Yeah, right.
To get into the huge historical errors, like the fact that there is zero evidence for a global flood as described by the Bible.
You sure about that? Zero? I mean, all of the layers of dirt? Like when you look at the Grand Canyon? That where the river enters the Grand Canyon and the top of the Kaibab Plateau, there's over a mile difference? And rivers don't flow uphill? We know rapid geology is a thing. Look at the Upper Toutle River Valley from the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1982. Okay, when the Upper Toutle River Valley flooded out from a lahar, they nicknamed it Little Grand Canyon. And that thing formed overnight. We know rapid geology is a thing, son. Fossils? Fossils form under very specific conditions. It doesn't take millions of years to happen. Again, rapid geology is a thing. Another claim, another lack of sources.
Though, certainly I am open to the idea of that story being based on an historical local flood, but not only is there absence of evidence for the flood being global, there's also an evidence of absence, like the fact that several cultures all over the world seem to have survived it without even noticing it. But yeah, sometimes the Bible gets the name of a city right or some shit.
Like? You'll notice that he says that there were certain cultures that survived this global flood, but he doesn't seem to name any of them. And you want to know why? Because the Egyptians inflated their king lists to make them seem more long-lived. Okay? You know how we know this? Go back to the story of Jacob and Joseph in the Bible, right? Joseph gets sold by his brothers to slavery in Egypt, okay? And eventually there's a famine, right? And eventually all of the Israelites, okay, Jacob's family, and Jacob and his sons and all of them move down, okay? And the king goes, "How old are you?" That just goes to show that they were greatly inflating their king lists, okay? They make them seem more long-lived. Any others? They did the same thing. We know this, okay? Plus, there are over 200 flood legends from cultures around the world. And this whole notion of a regional flood, this is bullshit, okay? Because here's the flaw in that argument. Why wouldn't God have just told Noah, "Move. I'm going to flood this region. Move. Just pack up and move." Why would he have told him to build a boat and to fill it full of animals? And why would Native Americans in the middle of the Sonoran Desert in southwestern United States have a flood legend about a global flood? And a man saving his family and animals on a boat. Why would Polynesians out in the middle of islands have a global flood when none of their islands ever flood enough to be covered in water? It makes 0 sense, son. None whatsoever. Okay? And here's the other thing. Do you have any evidence to back up your claim that what Noah experienced was a regional flood or a local flood? Hint? No. He doesn't have any sources to back that up. It's a claim with 0 evidence. I have evidence for the flood. You don't want to recognize it as evidence because you want to say it's uniformitarianism and all this other crap, and that's fine. You're welcome to say that. But we have the evidence if you're willing to look beyond your own limited thinking and worldview. The problem is they don't. Okay? And also, names and locations have actually been confirmed through historicity, archaeology, and anthropology. Many, 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 many place names have been found in the Bible. Okay? We have a mountain of evidence for our Bible. You haven't provided a single piece of evidence for any single claim you've made yet. The scales right now, okay, if this was the Bible and this was you, you're way out of whack, son.
It also is significant that Jesus' miracles were not done in some remote place on earth with only a few witnesses.
No, that's right. They were done in, says here, a backwater district of the Roman Empire with a total population of a few 100,000 in the whole area, compared to just the city of Rome's population of about 1 million people at the time. Though I will definitely grant that Israel's position at the meeting point of 3 continents probably did make it easier to spread the new religion.
Okay. So would you believe Jesus' miracles if he did those miracles in Rome? Or would you still scoff at them? Second, Israel wasn't considered a backwater. I mean, you literally just said it. I mean, that would be like considering Hawaii a territory instead of a state. I mean, like, literally, you know... I mean, Britain was considered a frontier, which is where the Roman Empire extended to. Okay? It is true, the Romans didn't like the Israelites, because the Israelites refused to bow to the Roman gods and Caesar. Okay? Which is why the Roman Empire named the region Palestine, which was a Latinization of Philistine. Okay? Who was Israel's nemesis in the Old Testament. Philistines weren't around at the time of the Roman Empire. Okay? They were wiped out by Alexander the Great. But you will grant that it being at the confluence of 3 continents makes it easier to spread a new religion. And yet, since this was a hub of trading passing through the region, this was a backwater? Yeah, right. Oh, man. This guy's stupid. Oh, it makes my brain hurt. Oh, smack this guy. Somebody.
Instead, the miracles of Jesus were attested by multitudes of people all across Palestine throughout.
Okay. So, what he's referring to here, it says, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering from severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, that's 10 towns, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. Okay, 5:1 says, Now when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, And then he goes on to do the Sermon on the Mount, 9:8. Okay? This is, says, Jesus stepped into a boat, the crowd came to him, Jesus stepped into a boat and crossed over and came to his own town. Some men brought to him a paralytic lying on a mat. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Take heart, son, your sins are forgiven." At this, some teachers of the law said to themselves, "This fellow is blaspheming." Knowing their thoughts, Jesus said, "Why do you entertain evil thoughts in your hearts? Which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and walk'? But so you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." Then he said to the paralytic, "Get up, take your mat, and go home." And the man got up and went home. When the crowd saw this, they were filled with awe, and they praised God, who had given such authority to men. John 6:2 basically says, let me see here, 6:2. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he had performed on the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover feast was near. Okay? It's the feeding of the 5,000. Okay? It's the bread of life discourse. And so basically, okay, this is, I'm setting up the context of why this guy is saying that these people witnessed, the multitudes witnessed. Okay? Because there was always crowds following him. I mean, you could go to Jairus' daughter, or the healing of the synagogue official, in Luke, I think it's Luke 8. It's Mark 2, I think. It's like Matthew 9 and Mark 5. Dead girl and a sick woman from Mark 5, which is Matthew 9:18 through 26, and Luke 8:41 through 56. Those are the stories. But it's Mark 5. It's basically like there was a crowd of people following him, right? And Jairus comes up to him and says, "Hey, my daughter's sick. Could you please come?" And then the old woman, or the older woman with the bleeding condition, comes up and grabs onto the hem of Jesus' robe. And then they stop, and then Jesus, she gets scared. So they were in the middle of a crowd when that happened. Okay? So, yeah, these miracles were witnessed by hundreds and hundreds of people. Okay? So, let's continue on.
His ministry.
They were attested to by these people? You sure about that? Or was it just recorded in books written decades later that they saw them? Because I checked those Bible verses. They just say that there were crowds following him around. Yes. Where can I find the attestations of these people? There were thousands of them. Surely some of them could have written about it, or communicated to someone else who did. Given how many...
How do you think we get history? Can anybody tell me down in the comment section? How do we get history? Because this guy doesn't seem to doesn't know. So, has every single person that witnessed 9/11 written a book about it? I mean, we're in 2025. That happened in 2001. Okay? In fact, it's like 2 weeks before 9/11. Okay? The 24th anniversary of 9/11 in 2025 as of filming this. Okay? Or did every single person that took place in the battles of World War II on both sides write down their personal memoirs? Or was Band of Brothers written decades later after Easy Company's exploits? And the author interviewed the surviving people? Yeah. I mean, you just debunked your own point. Because the crowds did say things, if you bothered to actually read the verses around those, the ones cited, which means that the people were either A, eyewitnesses, like Matthew, Peter, through Mark, and John, or interviewed by someone i.e. Luke. Which means that you have to discount all of history now. Thank you, Vice Rhino. You are like the third atheist that I have done these things on, where we have to discount every single book in history because not everybody wrote down history. Thank you. That's right. You cannot use any history books now, according to Vice Rhino here. Thank you, Vice Rhino. That's your logic, son. Oh, and Band of Brothers was written about the same time frame as Mark, Matthew, and Luke, approximately 40 years after Jesus' life and death. Which also debunks your point here, because you're saying it was written decades later. Yes, so was Band of Brothers. I mean, you don't think the battles that those guys went through wasn't seared into their fucking minds? Come on, dude. You still haven't brought any evidence, Mr. Better Sourced.
Historians were roaming around first century Judea, you'd think one of them would have noticed such a big movement. But alas, all we have are the Gospels.
Wrong. Josephus? Tacitus? Eusebius? Any of those names ring a bell? Those are all historians. Granted, Eusebius was in the 4th century. Okay, it was in the 300s when he wrote his. Okay, church history. But he was writing on the gathered church traditions of everything from, I think, or was he 3rd century? Let me see here. Eusebius was... Hang on one second. Eusebius. Come on, Eusebius. I know he's in here. Come on. John. Yeah, Eusebius was 265 to 339. He was a church historian who had access to many sources no longer existing. He says that John wrote the 4th Gospel and is unambiguously authentic. History of the Church 3.24.7. In the next chapter, he says the 4 Gospels, which includes John, were undisputed books in the canon, authoritative books. In this case, in the New Testament, in 3.25.1. Okay? So, basically, we have it on good authority, okay, from actual historians, extra-biblical sources, that these are the books, and that there was a huge movement there. Josephus actually wrote it down in his either Antiquities or Battles. I can't remember which one it was. But he wrote it down. Tacitus also makes the claim of that. So, again, your claim here is false, and you have 0 sources to back up your claim, son. Oh my God. These guys are so dumb. It makes my brain hurt. It really does. I mean, it's like every time I sit down to do this damn thing, it's like these people can't seem to figure out that if they did more than a cursory 5-second Google search, okay? Because, I mean, I bet they just look at Rational Wiki and go, oh, yeah, this stuff is crap. Because it's an echo chamber.
Books written by non-eyewitnesses, with 2 of them plagiarizing liberally off the first, and the 4th going out of his way to contradict the other 3.
Contradictions? Like? Like what? You'll notice that they say this. Oh, the Bible has contradictions. And then they move on. Okay? Because they know if they did actually say what was contradictory, like, they know that us Christians who know the Bible would automatically destroy their supposed contradictions, because there are no contradictions in the Bible. So, this guy is conflating the claims about the Gnostic Gospels, written in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, with no knowledge of the region and geography, okay, and tries to place that squarely on the Gospels, okay? which have accurate place names, features, geography, etc. Oh, and these plagiarizing claims again. Go read Cold Case Christianity by J. Werner Wallace. Again, claims made, no sources. Because literally, like, a lot of people make that claim of, oh, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are just plagiarizing one another. No, they're not. They're eyewitnesses. Okay? Or they're getting their sources from eyewitnesses in the case of Luke. Because he literally traveled from Rome back to Judea and, like, present-day Israel, and literally sat there, okay, and interviewed the surviving members. Okay? Which is why his accounts sound so similar. John had a different audience that he was writing to in his gospel. Okay? Because there were a lot of people at the time, even in first century, okay, Christianity, and early second century Christianity, there were heretics who were saying Christ was not a deity. He was just a man. He was just a prophet. And even then, and that's why John writes his gospel the way he does, is because he is showing the absolute divinity. But the funny thing is that the divinity of Christ has never been in doubt. And we'll get into that in a little bit.
Thousands of witnesses on several occasions, yet not a single eyewitness account.
The gospel writers were eyewitnesses. Or in the case of Luke, okay, interviewed by him. Like I said. Okay? The reason why Luke starts with Martha and Mary, okay, is because he's doing a historical account. He's getting all of the eyewitnesses involved in the events. Okay? That's the point. And Vice Rhino would know this if he read the Bible instead of parroting Aaron Ra. Because that's all he's doing here. He's just parroting Aaron Ra. Okay, a couple more and then we'll call it good.
Almost like the stories were made up, or at the very least embellished.
Made up? Embellished? Do you have any evidence to back up those claims? Do you have, like, some kind of a story somewhere, Vice Rhino, okay, that shows that Jesus was just a man, and then they embellished the stories? Do you have any? No? Thought not.
According to John, Jesus once healed a sick man at the pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem, where a great multitude of sick people had congregated. According to Luke, Jesus healed a paralytic in Capernaum, in the house there in Capernaum, full of Pharisees and teachers of the...
Okay. So the story that he's talking about, right, there in John, at the beginning, is... John 5, 1 through 15. He says, Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for the feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow, and who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later Jesus found him at the temple and said, See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. Now, the one here in Luke 5, okay, is, I believe, yeah, it's another paralytic. One day he was teaching, as he was teaching, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, who had come from every village in Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem, were sitting there, and the power of the Lord was present for him to heal the sick. Some men came carrying a paralytic on a mat and tried to take him into the house and lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and lowered him on his mat through the tiles in the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. So again, I mean, there's a Pharisee. You know, there's like Pharisees and stuff talking about this, and it's kind of funny because he's going to mention this here in a minute.
Law, who had come out of every town of Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem.
Yeah, he did it in front of Pharisees and teachers of the law, educated and literate people who would have been able to write about it. Yet none of them ever did. Not that we know of at any rate. And while the Catholic...
Would that have made a difference if a Pharisee wrote about Jesus and his miracles? Because we do have records of various Pharisees in the Gospels talking about Jesus. Okay? And Josephus actually, like, when he interviewed some of the Pharisees in his Antiquities and Battles and all of his writings, Josephus actually does say that the Pharisees knew this man Jesus well. Okay? That they had interviewed him before they crucified him. Okay? But we do have a Pharisee that wrote about him. Okay? Saul, a.k.a. Paul. Acts chapter 9. Saul's conversion on the road to Damascus. Okay? He literally echoes that again at the very end of the book when he's talking to Augustus. Okay? Or Agrippa. No, it's Agrippa. Sorry. It's... Hang on. I always get him confused. So... Before Festus, King Agrippa. Yeah, it's Paul before Agrippa. He literally says it in 26, starting in verse 12. He says, "On one of these journeys I was going to Damascus with the authority and the commission of the chief priests. About noon, O king, I was on the road. I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, blazing around me and my companions. We fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, 'Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads.' Then I asked, 'Who are you, Lord?' 'I am Jesus whom you are persecuting,' the Lord replied. 'Now get up and stand on your feet. I have appeared to you to appoint you as a servant and as a witness of what you have seen of me and what I will show you. I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I am sending you to them to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by me in faith.' So then, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient in the vision from heaven. First to those in Damascus, and then to those in Jerusalem, and in all Judea, and to the Gentiles also. I preached that they should repent and turn to God and prove their repentance by their deeds. That is why the Jews seized me in the temple courts and tried to kill me. But I've had God's help to this very day, and so I stand here to testify to small and great alike. I am saying nothing beyond what the prophets and Moses said would happen. That Christ would suffer, and as the first rise from the dead, would proclaim light to his own people and to the Gentiles." At this point, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. "You are out of your mind," Paul shouted. Your great learning is driving you insane." "I am not insane, most excellent Festus," Paul replied. "What I am saying is true and reasonable. The king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I am convinced that none of this has escaped his notice because it was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets I know you do. Which King Agrippa said to Paul, do you think that in such a short time, you can persuade me to be a Christian? Paul replied, short time or long, I pray God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today may become what I am, except for these chains. The king rose, and with him the governor and Bernice, and those sitting with them. They left the room, and while talking with one another, they said, this man is not doing anything that deserves death or imprisonment. Agrippa said to Festus, this man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar. Also, Romans 6, 8 through 10, 10, 9 and 10. 1 Corinthians 9, 1, 15, 3 through 11 and 12. 1 Corinthians 4, 13 through 15, or 2 Corinthians 4, 2 Corinthians 4, 13 through 15. I mean, there's a Pharisee for you. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He zealously pursued these Christians, okay, and stoned some of them to death. He had a letter in his hand when he was going to Damascus, basically giving him permission to round up all the Jews in the Bible-believing, the Jesus-believing Christians, okay, the followers of the way, round them up and send them back to Jerusalem for trial and execution. Literally had the document in his hand when Jesus appeared to him and said, why are you persecuting me? I mean, he's talking about miracles and seeing Christ after he rose from the dead. Are you stupid? Did you not know that? Because it seems like you didn't know that. That we literally have a Pharisee who converted over to being a Christian, okay, and literally went around talking to people, converting people, starting church plants everywhere. And we have the words of Pharisees. We have the words of Nicodemus, Caiaphas, Gamaliel, okay, written down and preserved in the very book that you're trying to say isn't accurate. But we have their words. How would we have gotten their words? Probably by the eyewitness accounts. Duh. Alright. Last little bit, then we'll call it an episode.
The church was fond of making the writings of people with dissenting opinions just disappear. There were often rebuttals that would give us a glimpse as to the contents of their opponents' writings. So, the Pharisees apparently didn't think it necessary to write anything about the guy running around with the power of God, either in support of him or against him.
Except Paul. Plus, the book of Acts records much of the Pharisees' activities surrounding Jesus' followers. Eyewitness accounts of that in Acts 3 through 8. Literally. Okay? It literally, like, flings open the doors. We have, in the gospel accounts, okay, many of the words of the Pharisees in their entirety. We must get rid of this guy. They tried to plot to kill Jesus on multiple occasions. Okay? Why would they have written that stuff down? Okay? It doesn't make any sense. Hi, Dev. I mean, oh gosh, this is just so dumb, man. Like, again, no sources. I have plenty, including the Bible. You have none, son. You literally have 0 sources. You can't back up a single claim you've made. Okay? I mean, if I were to drag out some Talmudic references, okay, that the Jews kept around for many years talking about Jesus, okay, and talking about the activities of Caiaphas and all of that kind of stuff, would that shut your ass? Because literally, you have 0 sources to back up your claim that the Pharisees never wrote anything down, okay? None whatsoever. I have a ton of books, because like a third, or like half of the New Testament, okay, was literally written by a Pharisee. and by one of his followers who was writing his words down as an eyewitness. I mean, honestly, this guy is the dumbest person on earth right now. Because he claims to be better sourced than the Bible, and yet hasn't brought up a single source to back up any single claim he makes. This is the stupidity on display. Folks, it has to end. Okay? It has to end. Ignorance can be cured. Willing ignorance is a whole nother matter entirely. Okay? And the Bible says they will be willingly ignorant. Multiple times it says that. Okay? Romans 1, Romans 3, 2 Peter 3. That's just to name a few. Okay? Paul says they'll be willingly ignorant. They don't understand because they don't want to understand. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below, let me know what you think of this series so far. And as we say, we will see you on the next one.